This is a scary new reality.
Vaccine is posing a serious problem,
which could then become self-replicating through your gut bacteria.
And the lipid nanoparticle was basically designed to deliver chemotherapy all over the body.
What's unique here is the spike protein was intentionally manipulated, and there's no stop button here.
It can be permanent, which means permanent change to humanity. That is one of the scariest things that really is happening with this so-called vaccine.
It's possible that those who took the vaccine will never be the same again.
Some of these blood clots that have been taken out of people who've had the vaccines, they're very unusual. They seem to have protein incorporated in them.
The vaccines are harnessing the human cell biology.
What are the implications of that? Why would that matter?
You could be producing the spike protein forever.
Forever, indefinitely.
Not just in a person, but the human race may be producing it forever.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Naomi Wolf here at the Wellness Company in Dallas, this extraordinary event. And I'm joined by, again, some of my personal heroes, people I admire so much, and I'll introduce them and then I will let them introduce themselves. But there is Dr. Paul Alexander, Dr. William Makis, Dr. Heather Gessling, Dr. Peter McCullough, and Dr. Roger Hodkinson. So briefly introduce yourselves, please, left to right, or right to left, I beg your pardon, starting with you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Wolf. Paul Alexander, and germane to this, my background training is in clinical epidemiology, evidence-based medicine, and my education was at the University of Toronto, Oxford, Johns Hopkins, and McMaster. I work for the World Health Organization and PAHO in COVID response and the Trump administration, and I've been partnered with people like Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Harvey Risch since then, on issues around early treatment, anti-lockdowns, etc.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. William Makis. I'm a cancer specialist and a cancer researcher in Canada.
Wonderful.
I'm Dr. Heather Gessling. I'm a family medicine physician. I have an independent practice in Missouri. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Medical Board of the Wellness Company.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm an internist and cardiologist, also a research epidemiologist, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the Wellness Company.
And Dr. Roger Hodkinson, I'm a retired Canadian pathologist who's been involved in prevention for 40 years, taking on big tobacco many years ago. I've had all kinds of leadership roles in pathology, both provincially and nationally, that I won't bore you with, because we really want to talk about the Wellness Company.
And spike protein.
All right.
And the spike protein.
Well, what a distinguished group of experts, and you will have the answers to this, but many people who are not scientists and doctors were introduced to the term spike protein with the virus, because it contains spike protein, and also, puzzlingly to many, the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, also contains spike protein. So what are spike proteins? Let me start with Dr. Alexander.
Okay, thank you very much. So the spike protein is the protein molecule that sits on the outside of the viral ball. It's the spike or the spicule, and it's the molecule that interfaces with the ACE2 receptor, which is the receptors on the surface of the host cells that allows the infection to begin taking place. The spike protein consists of some subunits S1, S2. There's some cleavage involved with some furin, TMPRSS protease cleavage. It is the most toxic, dangerous part of the virus. The problem for us is that the vaccine, the COVID vaccines, principally the mRNA, but actually all of the vaccines at some point, regardless of the delivery platform, result in the spike protein. The spike protein from the vaccine is posing a serious problem to cardiovascular health, in fact, to the whole system's health of the body.
Well, thank you for that comprehensive answer. So let me turn to the oncologist, Dr. Makis. Specifically, tell me more about how the spike protein affects the human body. In addition to cardiovascularly, what are some other problems that it can cause that you're seeing?
Well, the one of the problems of many of the vaccines, especially the Pfizer and Moderna, was the lipid nanoparticle that packages the mRNA that codes for the spike protein. And the lipid nanoparticle was basically designed to deliver chemotherapy all over the body, and it was now repurposed for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. They package the mRNA that codes for the spike protein in these lipid nanoparticles. We now know that these lipid nanoparticles, they end up in the bloodstream, they go all over the body. And the lipid nanoparticles, they deliver this mRNA, which then codes for the spike protein, into the various organs, into the heart, gets into the brain, gets into the liver, the kidneys, the testes, the ovaries, the bone marrow. And that is why we're starting to see some of these horrific injuries that are, all over the body. Cardiovascular injuries, brain injuries, autoimmune issues, you name it, fertility issues.
Right.
That's a big one.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to add anything about how spike manifests in the body before we go on to the next question?
I think it's important for people to understand that viruses have proteins on their surface in order to attach to cells. So there's a spike protein for the influenza virus. It's called the hemagglutinates. But natural viruses, the body has a way of breaking them down and disposing them. We all get common colds and we handle it. What's unique here is the spike protein was intentionally manipulated by design in the Wuhan Institute of Virology by U.S. research that had a goal of making the spike protein carry this virus and become far more contagious and far more dangerous. The spike protein docks with the ACE2 receptors, called the receptor binding domain, and then injects itself into the human body via the spike protein. What the vaccines do is they inject the genetic code and bypass the human's immune system, and now normal cells in the body, what's called somatic cells, produce the spike protein for an uncontrolled duration and an uncontrolled quantity. And there's no stop button here. This isn't like a shot where there's a set amount of spike protein. There's only one vaccine that gives a set amount of spike protein. That's the Novavax vaccine. All the ones are genetic, and it's the uncontrolled production of spike protein and its danger that makes us so concerned about the vaccines.
Yes, Dr.
And the
Hodgins.
process continues beyond that, because we now know that the RNA in the vaccine can be what we call reverse transcribed, which means the information in the RNA can be incorporated into the DNA of the cell. The significance of that is it can be permanent, which means transgenerational, which means permanent change to humanity, not studied in terms of its frequency and its implications. That is one of the scariest things that really is happening with this so-called vaccine.
It's possible that those who took the vaccine will never be the same again. A paper by Marcus Alden, first author, Yang D. Marinis, senior author, Malmo, Sweden. D. Marinis, by the way, very well-respected molecular biologist. This paper has not been challenged. They showed that Pfizer, within a few hours of injection in human hepatoma cell line, is readily reverse transcribed. That is, the human body assembles base pairs to line up against Pfizer, takes a mirror image of Pfizer, and then installs it into the nucleus, into human DNA, changing the human genome. The reporter region was 444 base pairs out of the full 1280 base pairs, but it's right in the middle, and it's a very reliable area. The investigators are certain that it got into the human nucleus. It was a very clear signal. No one has challenged that finding. So at least a mosaic of cells, and it depends on how many cells actually are touched by the lipid nanoparticles of messenger RNA, but for sure, a mosaic of cells have been permanently changed.
Yes.
So can I ask, I'm sorry, can I ask for a layperson, what are the implications of that? Why would that matter?
You could be producing the spike protein forever.
Forever, indefinitely.
Not just in a person, but the human race may be producing it forever?
Because of the reverse transcription, because of the ability. Well, also, there's another thought that we haven't really brought up today, which is the contamination with DNA plasmids within the vaccines themselves,
Yep.
and the fact that that DNA plasmid contamination could also affect the gut bacteria and inject itself into E. coli, which could then become self-replicating through your gut bacteria, and then also potentially
Again, which would mean what for a layperson?
your bacteria in your gut, because of the potential DNA plasmid, could start producing spike. And this is
Which could mean, I'm sorry to
Well,
keep
in lay,
pushing, but
in lay
what's the
terms,
risk of that?
in lay terms, you could be shedding spike in your shit forever.
So interesting.
Well, here's the issue.
Yeah.
These are foreign sequences of genetic code.
Right.
Messenger RNA, for sure. The messenger RNA itself is not natural messenger RNA.
Right.
You know, there are 4 base pairs. One's a pyrimidine called uracil. Pfizer and Moderna made the strategic decision to replace all the uracil with pseudouridine, making the messenger RNA essentially indestructible. They massively increased the efficiency of this, but the human body cannot use its own RNases to break
it
down
down.
the messenger RNA.
All right, so let me pause you all right there because this English major is feeling like I need to understand some terms. Do you want to say something
Yeah,
before
well,
I?
to amplify what Dr. McCullough is saying,
Yes.
essentially the vaccine makers found a way to hide the synthetic messenger RNA from the vaccine from our immune system, which is our natural defense, so that it could be stable,
Gotcha.
it could remain hidden, it could remain protected in the lipid nanoparticle. And we have a good piece of research in Cell by Rolken et al. That showed that they found spike protein in the germinal cell 60 days post-shot. And we have a seminal paper by colleagues of Dr. McCullough, Bruce Patterson. They found that they found spike post-infection, 16 months post-infection, subunit spike messenger RNA in the tissue. We could extrapolate that to vaccine. In essence, the spike protein is remaining within the system over years.
Right. So let me try to say in lay English what I think I'm hearing. The spike protein is not natural, right? No. It's something the human body has not encountered before. It was artificially created. It has been disguised, essentially, to sneak past the immune system. It may lodge itself in our gut, producing more spike protein. It may produce more spike protein forever. Is that what you've said?
Theoretically.
And not just for this generation, but for generations to come. Am I correctly summarizing what all of you have said?
That's correct, but keep in mind that the spike protein is the product of the genetic code. So everything you said is correct because the genetic code is right there to produce the spike protein. The human body doesn't normally produce this and should never produce this. Never. The inside of human cells have never produced spike protein as part of a protein synthesis in human cells. The vaccines are harnessing human cell biology and producing this deadly protein.
So it's kind of weaponizing evolution.
Well, one thing I want to point out is people say, well, there's spike protein in COVID, the virus itself, that and so the virus is also as dangerous. But as Dr. McCullough has mentioned, they've actually modified in the mRNA. So the spike protein in the vaccines is modified to be resistant to breakdown, whereas the spike protein in the virus, our body can break it down and deal with it much more easily.
Well, and another thing is once somebody is infected with a COVID virus, and the cells that are infected with COVID virus are going to produce spike. The difference between an infection and the vaccine is the vaccine, because of the lipid nanoparticle technology, is designed to be able to go throughout the body diffusely to produce spike protein.
Okay.
So it's a much different production.
So it's much more integrated into the human
and
body.
diffuse.
Right. Well, there's a subtlety here. There's a seminal paper by Nunez Castillo showing that the genetic code in Pfizer and Moderna had to be humanized in order for human ribosomes to read it. So it's not just straight messenger RNA out of the vial that is the perfect code matching the Wuhan strain. There are segments that had to be humanized so the ribosomes would read it and actually accept it. Otherwise, the ribosomes, it never would have engaged to produce it. And so these humanized segments of the messenger RNA in their work suggests that some of the spike protein is sufficient enough to human code to create autoimmunity. This is really worrisome. And so the homology.
You mean to turn our bodies against themselves?
Well, here's an example. And in the paper, it's pointed out that there's about 30 of these areas where there's homology. So there's homology.
What's homology?
Homology means there's similarity enough. So for instance, there's similarity enough, for instance, on blood clotting factors to promote blood clotting. There's similarity enough, for instance, on tumor suppressor or activation. On the cancer side, there's homology enough for various other proteins that would incite autoimmunity. So this is scary. This is a scary new reality.
Can I just rephrase what I think you just said? I think you just said that the way the spike was manufactured embeds in itself disease causation in the human body. Is that correct?
There are sequences in the spike that are similar to our proteins in our tissues.
Right. So why is that bad?
Normal. Well,
Why
it's
is that
bad is because if you develop an immune reaction against the spike protein, now your immune system is going to look at some of your normal proteins that are similar, start attacking those as well.
So this is
like a
lupus type, autoimmune type.
There's an autoimmune attack on your normal
for those
tissues
cells
as well.
that are
like
showing
that are
spikes.
similar.
Yeah,
Oh
so
my gosh.
in theory, after vaccination, the body could start attacking itself in other areas where the vaccine or spike protein is not even operating because of chipping off autoimmunity across multiple areas.
And the body normally, there is rare, or how it happens is after like a viral infection, you have increased risk of autoimmunity because of the antibodies that you, from a normal infection, you would produce. And that's the antecedents of autoimmune disease. What we're arguing is that, what the science is beginning to show is that the vaccine, because of the antibodies being produced, the vaccine-induced antibodies, could set you up for a lifetime of autoimmune disease because your antibodies now, vaccine-induced antibodies, looking at your normal protein in your body tissue as foreign tissue. Because the key in autoimmune disease is your ability to your immune system to recognize self components from non-self.
Oh my gosh. So this is just absolutely chilling because you're describing something that must have been engineered, because this is very sophisticated.
Certainly.
I mean, I know it was, but engineered to turn the body into its own enemy.
Well, it could be, on its face value, just a necessity to get the body to read foreign genetic code. And so remember, the vaccines were rushed to market, that there was an urgency, and when they made a series of decisions, and the difference between Pfizer and Moderna, honestly, is probably the degree of humanization. So for instance, Moderna, it takes in the initial vaccines, it was 100 micrograms of messenger RNA, meaning they probably didn't humanize it as well as Pfizer.
Versus like 30.
Pfizer needed 30. So Pfizer actually had a much more efficient code that the RNA, the ribosomes were reading. Moderna was less efficient. But the point is, it created way too much exposure from a molecular biology perspective to cause misadventure in the human body.
And we still haven't answered the question, why did they choose spike for the genetic sequence? And maybe it had to do with, some, simple things like they knew that sequence and they needed to make it quick. I don't know. There could be more sort of ominous reasons, but we just don't know.
I think it's important to know also that all of the major vaccines are using the spike protein. Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and all the different versions of AstraZeneca that are being used globally. J&J, Sputnik, Novavax as well uses so they all use the spike protein. And you have
Does
to wonder,
China's vaccine use it, Sinopharm, or whatever it's called?
China has 12 different vaccines, but whether they're killed vaccines, antigen-based vaccines, or genetic, the human body gets unnecessarily exposed to a
Right.
potential lethal protein. Now the vaccine companies are retrospectively thinking, well, we should have vaccines that are nucleocapsid based or pick a benign part. Remember, there are many vaccines that we use in medicine. The goal is to pick a relatively benign part of the
Right.
organism, get immunity to that, and confer protection.
And this is June of 2023. They came out in November of 2020. They could have quickly realized that spike is pathologic. They could have, if they claim to be able to, have the ability to make different RNA, mRNA type vaccines so, quickly, why didn't they change the protein
Right,
a long
I
time
understand.
ago?
So basically, you're describing something much more ominous than I think most lay people get. You're describing something that has not ever been in humans, something that's artificial, something that turns the body against itself, and something that turns the body into a factory, potentially, of other kinds of disease, and something that may change people forever.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Oh,
move on this
Naomi.
happy note. Yes,
All for nothing.
right.
It was nothing more than a bad seasonal flu.
Right. Yeah.
And the whole world was subjected to this enormous complication.
I understand. Terrifying. What is the difference between spike mRNA and COVID virus? I think a lot of people are. Let's just take one person to answer that, because I think it must be a pretty quick answer. Do you want to just explain quickly?
The COVID virus is what is infected, what your cells are infected with, and you have insertion of the virus. It's attached, that virus attaches because of the spike protein, and then you get insertion of the virus, and then there's replication, and then the virus is replicating, and you get more spike production, but it's because of just a regular viral infection. But the COVID vaccine is the genetic sequence encapsulated by the lipid nanoparticle to encode for the spike protein.
There
what
is
is
a practical difference, so I think it's important to point out, is
Yes,
the
mRNA.
vaccines, when they came out of the box, they matched the original, what's called wild type genetic code, which was the most deadly and most virulent. Now, in nature, immediately the virus started to mutate, and the spike protein became more benign over time in the natural infection, while it stayed the same in the vaccines.
And they must have known that. Like Rochelle Walensky must have known that when she lied to Congress and said, "Oh, well."
Absolutely.
Yeah, they knew.
All right, so-
Honestly,
yeah.
just one thing to point out: when they rolled out the bivalent vaccines, they purposely left the original spike in that bivalent vaccine. That's the whole name, bivalent. It means that there's two different spikes in there. You've got the Omicron spike and you've got the original spike. Why did they leave the original spike in
Yeah,
the
well,
bivalent
That is a really
vaccine?
good
But
question.
not
Why
only
did
that,
they?
now they're on the news saying that they're discarding the bivalent vaccine come fall for surging infections they predict, and they're coming with another booster that will remove the BA4, BA5, and the Wuhan. Just completely new one. I think for the new predominant strain.
for XBB.
Yeah, for XBB. So they're actually saying that even the bivalent we just brought to market is junk.
Every single vaccine that's come forward has been obsolete the day it hit the ground because the virus keeps mutating more rapidly
Yeah.
than the vaccine.
And do you think that the vaccine itself, which was introduced at the end of 2020, created the more virulent strain Delta?
Two papers, one by Venkata Krishna and the other one by Neeson from Mayo Clinic, showed when we got to 25% of the population vaccinated, that was the inflection point by which the virus itself would learn to outsmart the vaccine and quickly become resistant to any vaccine-induced immunity. Multiple studies showed the virus in the nose and mouth of those fully vaccinated was just as abundant as somebody unvaccinated.
People should know, Naomi, you can never, ever, ever get ahead of an RNA virus. It's always a step ahead of you, and whatever vaccine you create is for yesterday's yesterday's virus.
So the whole thing was a fool's errand
Yep.
from the start. All right. So we've covered, is it pathological? Spike proteins and increased myocarditis. Is there a direct connection? Dr. McCullough.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'm a cardiologist. I can tell you before COVID-19, I saw 2 cases of myocarditis my entire career. It can happen. It can happen with the parvovirus or adenovirus. There's actually the most deadly form is called giant cell myocarditis, of which we don't know what causes it, but 2 cases over decades. Now I see 2 cases per day in the clinic. It's that frequent. What we learned is that COVID-19, the viral infection, can cause some myocarditis. The Israeli military, the U.S. military, the NCAA college athletic leagues had massive screening programs for COVID myocarditis in 2020 before the vaccines. What did they find? They found a handful of cases that would meet a definition, none serious, no hospitalizations and deaths, none. What happened is those organizations dropped their screening programs. The vaccines were introduced. Within 6 months, the FDA, the CDC, and every regulatory agency say the vaccines caused myocarditis, and the myocarditis we saw caused by the vaccines was serious. Rates of hospitalizations of young people were about 90%. We've seen fatal case after fatal case. Most recent report by Cho and colleagues from Korea. This is stunning. They're reporting 480 cases in one paper, 21 deaths. Peak age, 18 to 24, 90% are men. COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis is fatal, and people should understand that. Every shot they take, there's a risk.
There's a paper, a good paper that Dr. McCullough had cited, and I had studied up more, by Schwab et al. Out of Germany. There were 35 initially in this, they did autopsies, and they ended up with 25 of the autopsies where they showed 5 of them, about 20%, were directly, the deaths were due to myocarditis, and they found about 70% of all of the autopsies of those 25 had some sort of link to vaccine-induced injury. So it's a very, very serious issue. That paper by Schwab et al. Germany is critical.
And the CDC had the goal to say that that was mild.
Yeah.
Mild and rare.
Shocking.
Mild and rare.
Well, let's move on to, as people are listening to this in despair, I understand that the Wellness Company has some promising treatments. Can one of you speak to me, Dr. Hodkinson, let's start with you, about nattokinase and spike support?
Well, I'd rather defer that to clinicians.
Sure.
As a pathologist, I'm not very much involved in treatment.
So we have developed a formula called Spike Support. It has nattokinase in it as one of the most potent ingredients. And we knew when we were developing the formula that nattokinase can help break down fibrin clots. We knew that those that have COVID or long haul COVID or vaccine injury have a propensity to clots. And so nattokinase has been very effective at helping prevent or even treat fibrin clots for decades. So well-known function. And then we also have a study that came out, I think, in November of 2021 that showed that dandelion root could help prevent spike from attaching to ACE receptors. And so we added dandelion root, and then we also have black cumin seeds, selenium, Irish sea moss, and green tea extract, which can all help with cellular energy and repair. And the spike support has been incredibly helpful for many patients that have tried other things for their long haul COVID or vaccine injury. It's helped with energy, brain fog, neuropathy, help with prevention of clots and breakdown of clots. And so that's one thing. And then we also have physicians that are trained in being able to treat long haul COVID and vaccine injury, protocols that we developed as a team to utilize natural substances, lifestyle changes such as a ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, as well as pharmaceuticals such as ivermectin, low-dose naltrexone, steroids that can be able to help long-haul COVID and vaccine injury. So we have discussed, the nature of spike pathology, spike disease, and it is exciting to be able to see that there are patients that are experiencing some relief from this with the spike support and with the protocols that we've developed.
Well, that's good to hear. It seems as if we've talked about a lot of the dangers and consequences of spike protein, but we haven't talked about crossing through the placenta and the breast milk, and we haven't talked about increased IgG4 from IgG1. So I don't know about the former, and I don't understand the latter. So let's take the spike protein, the breast milk first. Who would like to speak to that?
I'll take that. Hannah and colleagues, JAMA 2022, women breastfeeding, they measured and isolated the messenger RNA itself in the breast milk. Separately, a paper by Zhang and colleagues from China showed that a segment of genetic code in messenger RNA for a portion of the spike protein can go across the GI tract of mammals. So we would, as we sit here today, understand women who have taken the vaccine almost certainly via breast milk have delivered that vaccine to their babies, and the babies have actually taken it into their bodies.
Can I ask I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just iterating what Dr. McCullough and something Dr. Mackis also wrote about, is that we have the evidence, we have the studies now that show that there's placental transfer. And I think the message to pregnant women is this, that when you vaccinate, and we are talking about the COVID shot today, you need to understand that the content of the vaccine will cross the placenta into that baby in utero. And if you are generating antibodies, you, the pregnant woman, your antibodies will cross the placenta into the baby in utero. And you know, if you try to marry a lot of this science with somebody like a Van den Bosch, I mean, he's been out there with a lot of what he's saying, and if you accept even half of what he's saying, what he's arguing is that the spike protein, let's say in a baby in utero and a newborn infant, derives their own antibody response. Those antibodies in the infant, in the newborn, when it needs to initiate its own immune response, its own immune system, will be subverted by the antibodies from, let's say, the maternal vaccine, etc. And that will put the child in a very compromised position. And I also want to reiterate something Dr. Gessling said, is that something that must be clarified always. The science is maturing and developing in terms of the spike recovery, the nattokinase. It's still, you could say, still not really in infancy, but we have to call for more harder, more objective, larger studies in the future, just to bulletproof the nattokinase and its role. So we should always guard that pregnant women, women who are breastfeeding, children, people less than 18, or people who are on actual blood thinning medication should consult a physician before they take the spike protein, the spike recovery.
Yeah, I don't recommend it for pregnant or breastfeeding moms. And also, I've failed to mention that we added nattokinase to that formula because of the effect on fibrin clots. But then we found out from a study last December that actually there's two now, right? That it can actually degrade spike protein. So thank the Lord that we have that in the formula, and now it has multiple functions that we know of.
So it does two important things. It dissolves the spike protein. Oba and colleagues showed that against the virus itself. So we would anticipate that this effect exists. Believe it or not, people taking spike support, if they were actually to get a subsequent case of Omicron, may actually have protection against it because it dissolves the spike protein on the surface of the virus when it's alive. But it clearly, what the Tanikawa paper, that was really the seminal paper, demonstrates, it does dissolve the spike protein, whether it's intact or just in the cell lysate. That means, and nattokinase freely goes inside cells. So the spike protein is resident inside cells. It's going to dissolve it. As Paul says, we can't make any therapeutic claims because large randomized trials have not been done. But I tell you, I checked the register, they're not even planned. So if they're not even planned now, we are years away from prospective randomized trials. So what we're reliant on is our understanding of the science, of the mechanisms of action and the emerging data, and our clinical judgment. And it's our clinical judgment that spike support offers the best hope to people who have had multiple bouts of COVID, multiple bouts of vaccination, probably both, in starting to detoxify the body from spike protein.
And it might even have a purpose in people who feel perfectly well, who are not worried at all about spike protein, because there's a dynamic process in the body between blood clotting and clot breaking down. It's a technical word for that. And it's been shown that nattokinase in normal people who are totally asymptomatic, you will find an increased production of tests that show clots are breaking down.
D-dimer.
And maybe that's the reason the Japanese have that differential longevity.
Right. Well, the Japanese have been eating natto, which is the breakdown product, the fermentation product of soy, for over 1,000 years. The last 2 decades, they harvest nattokinase, the bacteria Subtilis natto, breaks it down, they harvest the enzyme, and it's available as a supplement. So it's already been tested in terms of safety dosing. So we know that tested even up to very, very large doses that it's safe. We know that even a single dose affects blood test parameters in the bloodstream. So we know it acts like a drug. And we know that, our convention is to give it about twice a day because it's short acting. That's important. If there is a bleeding complication, it's short acting. But like any other supplement or drug, there's caveats. If there's a soy allergy, it's likely that they're going to be allergic to it. And then bleeding, because it is a blood thinner. So patients who have bleeding tendencies to begin with, a problem called von Willebrand's factor, a variety of bleeding disorders that could be at risk for bleeding, as well as people on blood thinners. Now, having said that, we are developing an experience because people are actually prone to clotting, and they have blood clots with the vaccine and with COVID, of using nattokinase and the spike support in addition to blood thinners. And as a cardiologist, I'm in the business of prescribing blood thinners. I'm now very confident in using this product in addition to blood thinners.
And,
sorry, I just want to mention, there's one additional benefit that we haven't discussed for nattokinase, and that is that it can break down amyloid proteins. And there's been concern that in the mRNA sequence, in the spike protein sequence, there's actually sequences that are very similar that code for amyloid proteins. And people have been worried that if people have breakdown of spike protein in the body, is there translation of these amyloid proteins? Are they being deposited in the brain? Are people having deposition of amyloid in the heart? Is amyloid being deposited in the blood clots? Some of these blood clots that have been taken out of people who've had the vaccines, they're very firm, they're very unusual, they seem to have protein incorporated in them. Right. So nattokinase has actually been shown to degrade these amyloid proteins as well.
Could I just define it, Dr. Wolf, so that the listener really understands? When we use the term nattokinase as an enzyme, nattokinase, what we are talking about is a natural fibrinolytic, so that's a blood thinning enzyme that exists in nature. We've just taken what you can get from the plant, the soy, and we've put it in this supplement. So we've not created a drug or something. It's there. You can go and get it yourself. You just put it in the supplement.
But just summarize some of these other favorable off-target effects. Before COVID, nattokinase was included in a list of candidates that actually may be protective or a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, other forms of amyloidogenic disease and plaque-related disease. It lowers blood glucose a little bit. It lowers blood cholesterol a little bit. There are some studies suggesting it's anti-atherosclerotic, that it reduces cholesterol blockages in the blood vessel system.
Probably because it has K2 in it. I think that's part of that effect.
So, what we're telling our audience is that this is good news. This is a supplement the Japanese have been using for cardiovascular benefit for 20 years, in their society for 1,000 years, and boy, did we hit it in terms of it's really needed now. So for the first time in my practice, I'm widely recommending it to my patients because everyone's had COVID, and about, at least in the United States, 3/4 have taken a vaccine.
So all that being said, can someone speak to increase IgG4 from IgG1, which I don't understand what that means. Okay, let's just move on.
I'll take it on real quickly.
All right. Go ahead, it's tolerance, but let Dr. McCullough.
Let me take it on real quickly.
Please.
In 2021, there were a series of disturbing papers published. 2021, this is early on in the vaccine program, one notable paper is by Wheatley and colleagues, and making the case that if we were going to give a vaccine every 6 months and reinstall the genetic code for the same protein every 6 months, the human body will continue to see this and develop a form of immune imprinting. That is, in a sense, we'll say, listen, I saw this again, and then the human body would make switches in its immunoglobulin subclass because it keeps seeing the same thing, but there's not a real illness there. And so what's happened is with this immune imprinting, the human body's immune system has been misdirected and weakened. And by that fact, people who've taken the vaccine are more likely to get COVID. They're more likely to get recurrent COVID. And now a recent paper from Cleveland Clinic by Shretha and colleagues shows every dose of the vaccine, there's a greater chance of getting COVID over and over again compared to the unvaccinated who look the best.
So the idea of the shift towards IgG4, which is basically an immunoglobulin that is sort of gives you tolerance.
Tolerance, yeah.
You know, tolerance to an antigen, and that comes with we've seen that with repeated vaccinations. So if you've had, you know, the second shot, third shot, and so on, the more shots you have, the more of a tolerance that you build, and it's a weakening of your immune system. And what you're doing is you're basically shifting the protection that your body has against viruses. That's IgG1 and IgG3. Protection that you have against viruses and against cancer, you're shifting your immune system to just being tolerant to this antigen that you're being exposed to with repeated vaccinations. So you're actually losing protection against other viruses, and you're also losing protection against cancer. And that's one of the dangers.
Keep in mind, there's
of
never
that
been
shift.
a vaccine that people have to take every 6 months.
Right.
Forever.
Right. I
Everyone
wondered
should
about
understand this. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not aware of a vaccine that you take 2 doses just to get vaccinated. Has
Oh
that
yeah,
happened?
there's
are?
there's many
Hep
vaccines
A,
where
Hep
there's
B.
what's called primary series. So there's 1, 2, sometimes 3 doses. It's done through childhood vaccination.
Childhood, yeah.
But never as adults have we ever taken a shot every 6 months
Right.
with no end in sight.
Right, extraordinary.
Because right now, Dr. Wolf, the way it's set up, the negative effectiveness we're seeing in the population, right now, with the 5th dose on deck, the vaccine is dead. So theoretically now, you need a 6th, you need a 7th, and you need an 8th. So if we have a decision to make societally, is either we stop the vaccine or we get onto the vaccine booster treadmill and say, well, you know, I'm going to take a booster, might be every month,
Yes.
because it's not working.
Right.
It's dead.
Right. Well,
And we see that
yeah.
with every dose that you take, and that was the Cleveland study that had showed that. Every dose you take, your risk of being infected with COVID increases with every single dose.
Oh my gosh.
So you're actually seeing a worsening of your immune system.
Right.
With every single dose, your immune system takes a bigger and bigger hit.
Well, with that shocking conclusion, let's end. In addition to, you've identified supplements as being one way to tackle this massive problem. Let's talk, especially I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Makis, but all of you, about what people can take away that they can do in the rest of their lives to keep their immunities high. If people are watching this and thinking, okay, I'm just going to kill myself because I've taken 2 doses or 3 doses, you know, to give them hope, tell them what else they can do to make up for it, to help their bodies heal from this
You know,
tragic intervention.
one very simple thing that people can do is fasting. You know, fasting. If you're fasting for a certain period of time, that actually stimulates your body to start destroying the damaged cells, the cells that have the spike protein, that are expressing the spike protein that's causing the problems. You know, this autoimmunity and so on. So that's one simple thing that people can look at. You know, look at different kinds of fasting, intermittent fasting, dry fasting, and so on.
Thank you. Anything else?
I would add just general vitamin supplementation. I've been struck with the very positive data on vitamin D. Every study done for the infection, whether it's administration of vitamin D, measuring vitamin D levels, every single one is positive. I would not be surprised if high vitamin D levels would be protective against some of the spike protein injury. It's been a wonderful finding. People need to understand that now's the time. The spike protein knocks the human body down in virtually every organ system. Now's the time to live the healthiest lifestyle possible. Nutrition, exercise. I personally think freedom from alcohol, freedom from drug abuse, freedom from anything that could, freedom from smoking, anything that can knock the body down, because people who have taken the vaccine are at a health disadvantage now.
That
Well, and
include-
the rest of us too, with our discussions about shedding. You know, we have
Yeah.
to support our immunities as well. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
That includes sugar. It includes, you know, toxic foods. We've talked about seed oils. And so I think that whatever you can to get your health in order, you know, to reverse chronic diseases, to get your weight under control, to eat a healthy diet, and focus on non-toxic foods, get rid of artificial sweeteners and seed oils, all of these things that can really increase inflammation, will help your body sort of catch up to the inflammation that it's experiencing.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander.
And I think 2 quick points. One, the issue Dr. McCullough raised about healthier lifestyle and stuff, this issue about fasting, what the population should understand is this. From since you're a child, and I'll say it in a simple way, from since you're an infant and a child, you live your entire life. So I'm 50 odd years. For 50 odd years, I've been eating whatever comes around. You live your life and stuff. Every time you take something in you, whether it's a pill, you drink some coffee, you eat your food, you are putting your liver and your kidneys and stuff under pressure. At no point in your life did you stop and let your organs, especially your liver, take a break just to rejuvenate and clear. So when they talk about fasting, if you skip a meal and you put a little 10-hour fast somewhere in there, you are actually, for the first time, letting your liver breathe a little bit. Let it rejuvenate.
16 preferably.
Yeah, but I mean that's intermittent fasting, but
Right.
but also it is a critical thing, and the issue that we face societally is this one of metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome
Yes.
for men, waist sizes above 42, high cholesterol, high sugar, high triglycerides, etc. Women too have the issue. We need to get those parameters down, and if we get metabolic syndrome down in society, we're going to be dealing with a lot of the disorders we are facing.
Gotcha.
I think it's very important to be proactive with your health, especially now with such a large segment of the population vaccinated. Because a lot of people say, well, I've taken 4 or 5 vaccines, I feel fine. I don't believe in vaccine injuries because it didn't happen to me.
It's coming.
And you don't want to be, you don't want to be one of those people who dies in their sleep or collapses on the field somewhere.
People are so funny with their denial. I mean, people don't say, I smoke, therefore, and I don't have lung cancer, therefore I'm never going to have lung
Yeah,
cancer.
right.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, but being proactive. And did you want to have a last word?
Yes,
I want to say something.
Okay. I'll come back to you. Dr. Hodkinson.
life is not about delaying death. Life is about living. We should move forward with hope. We should enjoy life, not constantly worry about what's happened to us, make the most of the time that's left, and ideally transform our lifestyle into these positive elements of exercise, diet, nutraceuticals, etc. That's a very positive thing. But to park the fear at the door, live your life.
Beautiful. And how about you?
Get
You
sun and get outside and enjoy your family. 2 more things that I want to mention as far as nutraceuticals that I recommend highly for those that may be vaccine injured. One of them is bee pollen, which a lot of people don't understand and know what bee pollen is, and they think, oh, is it propolis, or is it royal jelly, or is it honey? And it's not. It's bee pollen, and it has 200 to 300 different vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, enzymes. It fills in all your nutritional cracks. One of the things that you need in order to heal is good nutrition, and bee pollen is a big part of that. And then another thing that happens with those that are vaccine injured is that they get mitochondrial dysfunction. Their mitochondria can just be blown apart. They just be, that's the energy producing organelle in your cell. And so it's producing ATP, which gives you energy. So we have a supplement called Mito Support that can actually give your mitochondria the energy, the ones that are functioning in there, the energy that they need so that they can have the nutrition necessary to produce that ATP.
All right, thank you. We've got some suggestions for the audience for action steps and lifestyle changes, and I personally feel inspired. So I'm very glad to have been part of this amazing conversation, and I'm grateful to all of you, and I want to again thank our sponsor, The Wellness Company, and I want to thank all of you for the courage that you've shown. All of you didn't just show up in this company. You've all had a journey telling the truth and putting your patients first, putting science first, putting medicine first, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.